Welcome to the professional development video for Own Your History, a program for high school U.S. history and ethnic studies classes. In this video, we will give you an introduction and orientation of OYH, its programs, and a detailed look at its education modules, resources, and how to use them. The content was presented at the NCSS Annual Conference held virtually in December of 2020. It is important to note that all the available Own Your History modules and resources are available at no cost under a Creative Commons license, as described on the Own Your History website Contact Us page.
I'm Bob Eager. I'm the developer of the Own Your History Social Studies History course. In March this year, it was clear that the COVID-19 pandemic had changed all our lives and was showing the effects of longstanding health inequities, especially for underserved poor people and communities of color. So we began working on the Own Your History module on health crises and health inequities since 1900, which is the topic of our program this morning. It is designed to allow students to explore and understand this important social history. We focus on 4 health crises since 1900, the 1918 influenza pandemic, polio in the 1950s, HIV/AIDS since 1980, and now the COVID pandemic. We consider the nature, causes, and effects of inequities in healthcare. Our panelists today are going to be Sandy Line, who is a 30-year Los Angeles Unified School District social studies teacher and curriculum developer, now an education consultant. He will focus on content literacy, inquiry, and citizenship. Then Michael Sabin, who is also a 30-plus year LAUSD teacher and now a consultant with the LA County Office of Education. And he will focus on using primary sources and will use the multimedia text set version of the module that we've developed. Finally, Stephanie Narrow, from PhD candidate in U.S. history at the University of California, Irvine. She'll focus on analyses of primary source images, which helps democratize learning spaces that include ESL and ELL international students and those with a range of learning abilities. We reference the California standards because all the Own Your History modules have been accepted by the Los Angeles Unified and the San Bernardino City Unified School Districts and provided to all their teachers.
This video includes the following sections: the Own Your History mission and guiding principles, the central themes or CLIC for content, literacy, inquiry, and citizenship. We also go over the multimedia text set resources, the source analysis and historical thinking, and lastly, we will review the visual primary source analysis for diverse classrooms. All Own Your History lessons and materials are available through the website www.ownyourhistory.us.
The guiding principles for Own Your History have been expressed well by 2 leading thinkers. First, Susan Nyman, who said, "All of us benefit from inheritances we did not choose and cannot change. Growing up involves deciding which part of the inheritance you want to claim as your own and how much you have to pay for the rest of it. This is as true for nations as for individuals." And then James Baldwin wrote, "History is not the past, it is the present. We carry our history with us. We are our history." As these quotes suggest, history teachers, you hold the key to our country's future, the future of American democracy. In 2020, I submit history is the most important subject in school. We began working on Own Your History in 2014 because we were such a deeply divided country with markedly different views of our history. In recent years, these divisions have only become deeper and more embedded. History matters. As one of the most diverse societies in the world, we have struggled since at least 1776 with a deep gap between expressed democratic ideals and the day-to-day realities of inequality, especially based on skin color. Americans are divided today because too many deny the facts of our national history. Our historical skeletons, including the worst aspects of subordination, discrimination, and injustice based on color, gender, ethnicity, religion, LGBTQ+ status, and other differences. This is hard history that we must own together to make progress as a country. Yet equality and justice remain unattained goals, as dramatized this year in the deaths of George Floyd and too many other people of color. The crucial questions for us as Americans is, what kind of country do we want for ourselves and our descendants? Own Your History objectively presents our history, good and bad, and is anti-racist. Clear-eyed, it seeks to educate and empower a new generation of citizens and leaders committed to achieving the promise of America for all. Now more than ever, we need a history-based dialogue to address our divisions and strengthen our democracy. Our democracy needs engaged citizens who honestly know our history, including our painful, hard history. Why is Own Your History different? It shows each student that history is at the core of our lives, whether we are aware of it or not. OYH develops that awareness and makes history personal. Our modules include activities to develop student leadership skills, civic engagement, and vision for a greater future. I grew up in the segregated South. My work on OYH has led me to explore my own inheritances, the history that I carry with me, including direct ancestors who owned enslaved Black people in Maryland, New York, North Carolina, from the 17th century to 1865. One of these, my 5 great-grandfather from New York, William Floyd, owned many enslaved persons on Long Island and was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Because of this and our other family history embedded in me, I consider myself to be a recovering racist who is striving to be anti-racist. OYH is anti-racist. In mid-2020, the country is struggling anew with the undeniable reality that Black Americans are still second-class citizens in most sectors of our society. Necessary systemic changes will require millions of educated and engaged citizens to become a permanent political force working to achieve equality for all. The role of white Americans is critical to achieving the promise of America for all in the 21st century. A lasting commitment requires a foundation of understanding of the country's hard history, especially the facts of systemic subordination of Blacks through enslavement and subsequent race-based laws, as well as institutional discrimination against minorities and communities of color. History education is thus critical to this process, to equip and sustain a durable political force devoted to fundamental changes for equality and justice. At Own Your History, we have 3 different programs. One are the school courses, which we're discussing one today. This slide lists the available Own Your History modules for school use. Each one is a 50-minute periods plus extension activities. You go to our website, there's a button you can click to request these modules in the full text ready for classroom use. And they're good for both in-class as well as remote education. Second, we are now developing a series of multimedia text sets parallel to each module, and one Michael will be talking about one shortly. This provides a flexible access to the range of issues and documents covered in each module and complements our school program. Finally, we have Own It, which is an after-school program, grade 7 to 12 transformative enrichment program that nurtures academic skills, personal growth, and leadership. It uses history to connect students' past to their future. Own It is being used now in a number of boys and girls clubs. I'll conclude with a brief overview of the health crises model and then turn the program over to my colleagues. The COVID pandemic has required every American to consider their health and the ways that American society and government contribute to our health, good or bad. For all Americans, health and the available health care are products of our history. For example, whether your family had enough income to buy adequate food, whether your neighborhood had nearby stores with good food, whether the air and water were clean and not polluted, whether medical care and hospitals were convenient and affordable, whether the available jobs entailed greater risk to health and safety. As I mentioned, in this module, we focus on the 1918 influenza, polio, HIV/AIDS, and COVID. We examine how some Americans, particularly communities of color and low-income people, were affected more severely. We look at the medical, economic, social, and historical factors that affect health and healthcare, including access to good nutrition, good education, good neighborhoods, and a healthy environment. Third, we look at legacies of inequality and discrimination long embedded in United States society, such as the effects of enslavement and Jim Crow segregation, conditions of Native Americans on reservations, experience of Latinx immigrants and migrant farm workers, and the conditions of low-income whites, especially in Appalachia and rural areas. Finally, the module has a culminating task that asks students to propose a plan of action to remedy existing inequities, to advance appropriate health care and establish equitable health care for all Americans in the future. Sandy will now tell you more about OYH.
I wanted to talk to you about the foundations of OYH. Michael and I are history teachers, and California history for the 11th grade is 20th century. So all of our lessons are based on the history social science framework from California, which was just recently adopted, well, not yesterday, but recently adopted in 2016. It includes several new things that have not been included before. The Fair Education Act deals with children with disabilities and LGBTQ. There's a financial literacy program, the Filipino American contributions, the Armenian genocide. Some of you who do not live in California do not realize that the largest Armenian population outside of Armenia is in California. So this is critical in our history. The presidency of Barack Obama and voter education. But these are new things in our framework. There are 4 themes that are stressed in the framework. First, of course, as history social scientists, we believe in the strong content. Then we talk about inquiry, the need to ask the questions. We talk about literacy, and we talk about citizenship. Content, of course, covers all of the history social science areas. As you can see for our little illustration here, our little cow, where there's a lot of beef in there. We've got economics, geography, civics, psychology, philosophy, humanities, sociology, all of the social sciences. So content is our first focus. Then we also have used, as part of our foundation for the OYH lessons, is the College Career and Civic Life framework, the C3 framework. Most of you are probably familiar with this because this is a national document, and it deals with primarily with the second focus of the framework, which is inquiry. We have an inquiry question for all of our modules. And this question is what we focus our lessons on, so that at the end of the modules, the students can address this question and use their skills to actually have a discussion based on it. And the health crisis question is, how can we redress significant inequities in American healthcare and health outcomes, especially in communities of color and for low-income people as exposed in the pandemic since 1900. The inquiry arc is critical to all of these lessons. First of all, the critical piece is developing an inquiry question on which the lessons can be formulated, so it leads the students to be able to draw their own conclusions based on evidence and be able to argue from a point of content. Then we apply disciplinary concepts and tools. We evaluate resources, which is critical when you are looking at resources from social media or historically. And then the last piece is taking action. We also base our lessons on Common Core standards. Those of you who are familiar with Common Core know that history social science is not, the Common Core standards are not content standards for us. They're process standards. And so these are standards that talk about argument and evidence. And that's critical in all of our lessons. We want to get away from students just having an opinion without evidence. We want them to base their answers on an opinion that they have, but they can support it with evidence. We also included in our lessons English language and English development framework for English language arts, because writing is a key piece of all of our lessons, and communication. Last of all, the last link in this presentation is citizenship. Citizenship is critical, as we've all seen in the last years, for student participation and adult participation. And what we're trying to do with these lessons is to get the students to become involved so that they can take a stand and perhaps promote action within their school, in their community, in their cities, based on things that they are passionately involved in. And our lessons lead to that. OYH makes your classroom click. It covers content, strong content. It covers literacy, both writing, speaking, thinking. It incorporates inquiry. The key question is critical to all of these lessons. And last of all, really so important, is the students to take action. And that's the citizenship piece. We are trying to teach our students that the skills that they learn in the classroom are the skills that they can take through their life to become politically and socially active and engaged adults. Michael?
So I am going to be able to take you through what a module looks like for Own Your History. And in this case, it's going to be this multimedia text set to help us explore what the components of the module. In the upper left-hand corner, you're going to notice that there is a link for you to request the full lesson material. The lessons that are available that you would receive through that link include a full lesson plan step by step for each day of the module. It includes teacher guides, student handouts, as well as student readings that have been edited for student use. Also, each module is going to start with an introduction to these difficult topics. And you'll see that there is a central question that Sandy referenced, that essential or compelling question that is in the middle of the Google document that you see right here for the health crisis. But in the top row, we have questions that are going to guide the inquiry that students are going to be engaged in, as well as some background information. For example, key vocabulary. An article, what we can do better, talking about healthcare. This article comes from the New England Journal of Medicine, as well as some background videos for each of the pandemics that the students will explore. Then students form, in this module, they form expert groups on each one of these pandemics. And the documents that they'll be exploring as they consider these questions, we've put links in each one for Spanish flu, polio, HIV/AIDS, and COVID. Those links are the full text documents that are available online. And they explore these pandemics from multiple points of view. In the lower left-hand corner, then are government agencies and acts that were taken to support the well-being, health and well-being within the United States. So students, after exploring the effects of the pandemics, also explore government responses and government actions taken to support the populations. And they analyze and they assess the success within the context of these pandemics. After going through this activity, students then, at the bottom row right there, you'll notice that there is an opportunity where it says to compare, to go deeper through extension activities, and Stephanie will talk about this in a little bit, but importantly in that lower right-hand corner, to take action. Here's some things that students can do based on their new understanding to actually connect to the present and to do something about it. We want students to become engaged, an engaged citizenry. We want students to feel empowered, that it's like, well, I learned this, but there's nothing I can do about it. That's not the point. Own Your History is about taking action, about owning that, and about going, and what do we do now with that? We are in the process of creating these multimedia text sets for each of the modules, and there will be two versions that we're planning. One for teacher use that would look like this, with the full text of the documents available, and then also one for student use, which would have the directed activities, for example, in the edited document, available by request through Own Your History. Let's go ahead and talk about what do we do when we have students work with these materials. One of the things that we know as history teachers is that we do have students use multiple primary sources, and that when we have students use these sources, they need to have the skills and tools to analyze and evaluate those sources to assess the reliability. We know that students are faced with multiple documents in their daily lives, certainly online. When we have the opportunity in the classroom and with Own Your History to look at the multiple documents that we are using, we want students to have the ability to feel that they are not just receiving the information, but they're thinking critically about that. And so linked within the HyperDoc are multiple ways and tools of having students take a look at these sources. It's important to have students source, contextualize, corroborate, and critically read the documents that they're looking at. As they go through these lessons, as they go through these modules, as they look at these multiple sources from multiple perspectives, they're going to become increasingly more comfortable of thinking critically about these. This model, this for sourcing, contextualizing, corroborating, and close reading comes from, it's a common model, but it also is developed in greater detail through the Stanford History Education Group. If we go to SHEG, the Stanford History Education Group, these materials are available online for free. You do need to create an account and a password, but these are ways and skills that students can then think about the documents that they're reading, and provides a variety of questions as well as sentence starters and prompts for students to use as they go through and think about the documents that they are reading. There are other sources also, and in the linked document, there are links to the Library of Congress. I'm sure that many of you have used this tool before. This is very helpful. It allows students to use multiple different documents. You'll notice in one spot right there, it says select the format of your primary source. And it will allow you then to take a look at multiple documents or multiple types of documents and think about going through a process where you're really thinking about these critically. It's not just receiving the information, but with Own Your History, you want to think critically as you are going through the steps of the inquiry. National Archives also, and Records Administration, is a wonderful source for primary source analysis tools based on different types of documents. Again, in Own Your History, there are multiple documents and types of sources that they're looking at, and how do they analyze and think about those critically. There's also, through the California History Project, there are other tools that students can use in order to analyze these documents. These different tools, there's no one tool that's better than the other. But as part of the process of Own Your History, it is important that students feel that they are empowered to discuss and analyze the documents, because ultimately they're going to be going to that, drawing that final conclusion, that response that they're going to create based on this inquiry question, that they are then going to support their point of view with evidence and then take action upon it. So that is the basic structure and format and content of the pandemic module. And I think now, Stephanie, we're going to talk about an extension activity and the university setting.
Own Your History has been developed primarily for K-12 education, but I want to show you today as how you can adopt some Own Your History modules and activities for the undergraduate classroom. I am a PhD candidate at the University of California, Irvine, and I teach a lot of undergraduate and lower division history courses. First, just a bit of a background on UCI. UCI is, we have a very, very diverse student population. We are both a Hispanic serving institution as well as an Anapizi, an Asian American, Native American, and Pacific Islander serving institution. And we also have a very robust international student population. Our international undergraduate student population sits at about 5,500 students. And a lot of our lower division history courses, our general education courses, we have an overwhelming number of international students. And this is primarily because American educated students are often able to use one or more of their high school history courses to satisfy some of these general education requirements. So we have a lot of international students in our undergraduate classes, many of whom are English language learners, or English might be their second language. And in a very reading and writing heavy, intensive discipline like history, they might not be as comfortable yet with their English language skills. And so I have found that using visual primary sources works very well in these environments. And so I'm going to show you how I would use the extension activities from this pandemics module in my classroom. And the images that I will be using come from this extension activity. They're linked in the multimedia text set. So these would be two examples of what I would use in the classroom. Do either compare and contrast or an analysis of both historic and contemporary pandemic posters. And so here we have one set comparing the Spanish flu with COVID-19, and we have another one comparing HIV, AIDS, and COVID. Both Spanish flu and HIV/AIDS epidemic are two topics that we do cover in we call it our History 40C, which is our lower division 20th century US history course. And I would do this in one of two ways. First would be doing some sort of in-class group activity using the 6 C's of primary source analysis that actually Michael just shared as well. I've used this in class and have students work in small groups, usually with their table mates, to fill out these different sections. Another way that I might use it would be to do a homework discussion post. We often have students post, we use Canvas as our online platform for our classes, post on Canvas a discussion post, and you do some sort of broad prompt of how would you compare the Spanish flu educational posters with posters of the COVID-19 pandemic today. And I've often found too that doing some sort of compare and contrast or linking current moments with historical moments really helps students who might not be history majors or who might have the question of why are we learning this? What is the point? Why does history matter? Linking current moments to historical ones helps to answer some of those questions and helps with student engagement as well. So that was just my really quick overview of what I would do in an undergraduate classroom. Again, though Own Your History has been created to align with K through 12 frameworks, especially here in California, you can adopt Own Your History for a variety of different educational settings. And Bob, I'll turn it back to you to close us up.
Thank you very much. And I do encourage everyone to go to our website, which has more about the program and the modules, and does have the request link so that you can get more materials if you're interested. And one thing I would just note is the materials we use, I think, work for a wide range of audiences. We've edited the materials that are dedicated to the modules for school use to make them short enough to be manageable in the classroom, but we have the full text available